Agenda 21 and the Decay of Democracy. Why there is no gold at the end of the rainbow. A critical discussion by Dr. Claudia Simone Dorchain. Brown is the Earth, Eco-Fascism and Agenda 21. Unity Earth, a non-governmental organization, NGO from the USA, advertises on its website in all the colors of the rainbow with a united world in which, according to Corona, improved new, fair economic conditions would apply to all people and nature conservation would be the top priority. The goals of Unity Earth are described in a promotional way. Unity Earth is a global network of organizations and individuals standing together in the quest to build a brighter future for humanity and for the planet. The worldwide network, which wants to connect individuals and organizations, presents itself as humanitarian. Peace camps are advertised almost like in the 70s, but the current possibilities of digitalization are also used extensively, with virtual retreats and an online university on topics of sustainable global transformation on all levels of human life. If you read carefully, you will recognize in the NGOs full-bodied promises to bring together all conservationists and friends of the healthy earth internationally an evidential correspondence with the principles and objectives of the Agenda 21, proclaimed by the United Nations. Unity Earth, this organization presented with a pastel soft focus, equating itself with environmental protection globally, wants to help reform values and the economy after the pandemic, and as a think tank bring together activists worldwide to propagate UN ideas. This all too obvious, heavy-handed instrumentalization of romantic earth and nature-related issues in the service of a questionable global agenda is consistent with eco-fascist tendencies that have become common in our present day and, as one example among many, raises some fundamental questions. What does eco-fascism mean? What are the goals of Agenda 21? To what extent does eco-fascism serve as a pretext for Agenda 21? The term eco-fascism is not defined anywhere in official sources. It is considered a fashionable word, a swear word, or a satirical vocabulary. Composed of ecology and fascism, the concrete meaning of the word can be derived as a compound of the two terms from which it is composed. Ecology comes from the Greek and means an attitude of value that takes into account the relationship of living beings to each other in their environment, or, this meaning is becoming increasingly strong today, protects environmental resources. Fascism comes from Latin and, according to Wilfredo Pareto and Georges Sorel, means a political direction in which personality cult and mass propaganda replace public justification and a fusion of secret police, economy and government subjugate the citizen. Structurally, the various fascism of this world have in common that they pursue chauvinistic goals as a political philosophy, propagating the substantial superiority of an ethnic group or an ideological value system up to and including the eradicating of alternatives. Another characteristic trait of fascism should give pause for thought. Unelected bodies, such as think tanks and NGOs, are allowed to massively influence the lives of citizens and even interfere with fundamental rights. As already stated for the World Health Organization, the UN has also never been democratically elected and has in principle no right to impose authoritarian norms of action on governments. It is a hallmark of fascism when non-governmental bodies are allowed to dictate public life, and vested interests in business are allowed to restrict fundamental liberties. This applies to the World Health Organization as well as to the United Nations, and of course also to hasty NGOs like Unity Earth, which see themselves as suppliers of activists for Agenda 21 under the guise of a kitschy love of nature. One could now call eco-fascism a political philosophy that puts the protection of the environment before the fundamental rights of citizens, or paternalistically disempowers people for the good of the earth, and this, typically fascist, without alternatives. What are the goals of Agenda 21? Agenda 21 is a United Nations action program that aims to recommend new guidelines for sustainable global development in the 21st century. Officially, it is about environmental protection, global communities of peaceful citizens, and responsibility for the future. Not coincidentally the same goals as Unity Earth. No thinking person is now seriously against environmental protection, especially not in a present in which the world population has already doubled within one generation and pragmatic solutions for dealing with resources have to be sought. But is this controversial Agenda 21 as people-friendly as it claims to be, environmentally friendly? Who really takes the trouble to read all the pages of the extensive UN program? In addition to the expected care for the earth, there are also goals that, according to a classical concept of democracy based on Jean-Jacques Rousseau or Alexis de Tocqueville, should primarily be left to the consensus of democratic states: settlement policy, consumption policy, demographic policy. Instead of respecting the basic democratic principle of participation and representation of citizens, the UN sees itself as entitled to prescribe foreign exchange in decisions that were not open to public debate. This Green Directive has yet another political surprise in store. The influence of NGOs is to be strengthened worldwide and cooperation with global business promoted. Democratic decision-making processes are thus successively undermined as decisions are centralized, homogenized, and plutocratized. Amazing was the Earth cult has up its sleeve: Pandora's box of foreign domination. The goal is Stalin's collectivism on a global scale. It is not socialism, not communism, it is Stalinism. Joseph Djougashvili called Stalin perverted communism along the lines of Marx and Lenin into an unprecedented tyranny. Today he is considered the most hated man in Russia. Meaningfully, when a first reckoning with Stalinism is made in Russia today, the focus is of unspeakable atrocities. The goal is Stalin's collectivism on a global scale. It is not socialism, not communism, it is Stalinism. Joseph Djougashvili called Stalin perverted communism along the lines of Marx and Lenin into an unprecedented tyranny. When a first reckoning with Stalinism is made in Russia today, the focus is on unspeakable atrocities such as the unprovoked arrest and banishment of more than 1 million innocent civilians, the gulags in Siberia, and national horrors such as the Nazino prison, where cannibalism prevailed due to the lack of supplies for the inmates. But Stalin's worst political act was the introduction of so-called collectivism as forced centralization. All citizens were to be united in collectives. The relative prosperity of the kulaks, they were rich peasants, was to be broken, and poverty was to be introduced for all, as well as dependence for all. The historical result is well known. Not much else is intended by the supposedly peaceful, green Agenda 21. Global super-collectives are to depopulate the rural regions and force the citizens to live in highly technologically monitored mega-metropolis, where they are only allowed to roboten every day. The kulaks, the wealthy and potentially dissenting middle class, will no longer exist in the collectivism of the dystopian future. A new wave of de-kulakization will follow the wave of resettlement in the mega metropolises, where consent, dependency, and surveillance will then prevail. Who will become Stalin 2.0? Perhaps it will no longer be a human being, but a trust. If you mix all the colors of the rainbow, it turns out brown. Contemporary political debate culture increasingly emanates less from parliaments than from think tanks and NGOs, which secure interpretive sovereignty for themselves and put each other in the public eye through platforming. Fascistoid is a large part of the debate culture already, and with necessity, as the think tanks increasingly function as suppliers of activists to the NGOs' plans, and the NGOs themselves as highly homogenizing promulgators of an so-called alternativeless doctrine that features the cold steel or Stalinism of technocracy under the cloak of peaceful nature. Unity Earth shows how it works. Take a dazzling advertisement of happy earth and gentle cows, or vice versa, drum up activists and smaller humanitarian organizations and switch them on until they can be taken over unopposed by the super NGO UN and sing the song of Agenda 21, which glorifies collectivism. It is time to add another definition to the fascist definition from the beginning. Fascism is not only, against Roger Griffin, one generic political ideology among others. Fascism is also a process term. It is the fermentation phase of every generic political ideology, when public regulatory mechanisms have long since become corrupt and monopolies of power have formed in the coterie of business, the military and government or para-government, which network mafia-like and make resistance impossible. The only difference is how long it takes for a system to enter the fermentation phase. In the case of communism, it took only about 20 years for the fascistoid fermentation of Stalinism to set in. With democracy, the most resilient form of generic political systems, because it was equipped with the sting of citizen participation, it took 70, 100, 200 years, depending on the state, for the fascistoid fermentation of global super-collectivity with compulsory consent to set in. But now the time has come. We can no longer deny it. The sting of citizen participation will be pulled. The citizen rationalized away, the bright colors of the rainbow eradicated. Brown is the earth. Thank you for your attention.